Welcome to Inventiveminds Child, Youth, and Family Support Center. We are a not-for-profit organization working with families in their day-to-day parenting by providing workshops and seminars related to pediatric and child development. Inventiveminds provides care in the early years sectors for newborn to age 6, licensed under the Ministry of Education all across Ontario. Inventiveminds cares an elementary school open to international students from junior kindergarten to grade 3. Inventiveminds Family Center helps families in mediation, arbitration, and parent coordination cases related to family separation and divorce. We support families during and past separation and divorce. Inventiveminds works with court orders to conduct child voice report and parenting courses related to CAS, court, and mediation purposes. To learn more about our services, reach us at inventivekids.com.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining this Inventiveminds Child, Youth, and Family Support Center workshop hosted by me, of course, Adam Stavis, your youth development mentor and coach. Today's workshop topic is entitled How to Get Toddlers and Preschoolers to Follow Directions. Today, we have with us Rose Morsch. Hello, Rose. Good morning. Great to have you here.
Hi, Adam. Thanks for having me with you.
Absolutely. So Rose has experience of over 20 years in child development and a bachelor's in child development. Rose is an RECE, holds designations that qualify her in child voice and child inclusivity. Rose is also a parent practitioner and family mediator. She specializes in working with infancy to teens and is the director of operations, of course, for our lovely Inventiveminds Child, Youth, and Family Support Center. Now, in relation to today's topic, how to get toddlers and preschoolers to follow directions, is there anything in particular you would like to address or talk about first before I get into my first of the series of questions we have for you?
I think following direction, I find it to be one of the biggest challenge parents have, especially parents of toddlers and preschoolers. We find ourselves, we are the one running after the kids rather than they follow us as direction. So it's definitely a challenge that many parents experience, and I'm happy to be here and just give some few tips and help parents through.
And just to kind of clarify a few things, there's of course going to be a lot of different circumstances where parents are having trouble having their preschoolers and toddlers follow directions because everybody's situation is different. Everything that we talk about today, I should mention, is not meant as advice, but more meant as educational content for some things that we've noticed in our experience that have worked in the past. It may or may not work for you. Again, it just depends on your specific situation. So to get, some advice based upon your specific circumstances, each one of us would have to work with you individually to address those issues firsthand. So we can talk about how to kind of reach out to you, Rose, if they need one-on-one.
And doesn't necessarily need to be with me. We have other practitioners or therapists in our center that can also be part of support system as they need it.
Perfect. Let's get right into the topic at hand here. Let's first discuss at what age do toddlers and preschoolers begin to display an ability to follow directions?
So around age 10 months, children can actually start following direction. You can start with one-word phrases for a 10-month-old. When they're toddlers, you use more complex sentences. You use more like two-word sentences. As they're cognitively progressing, you move into 3-4 sentences or 5-word sentences, and then full sentences. It really depends to the age of the child.
And I would imagine, especially if you're a parent, that the level of directions that an individual, a child can follow is going to be age dependent. And in the manner in which you communicate with them is, of course, going to be age dependent. Generally speaking, infancy is what we're talking about, is when we see.
Obviously, if your child has been diagnosed with exceptional needs, the following direction for that age group would be different than if our children have ADD or autism. The way we communicate, the way we expect to follow direction would vary. But really, dynamically, from 10 months, children can start following their directions.
Now, what are some reasons why toddlers and preschoolers may not follow directions well?
First, you want to look at, is their physical needs being met? If the child has had ear infection many times from infancy, toddlerhood, sometimes they could have difficulty fully hearing your voice. Parents don't recognize that until their children are 3 and 4, and all through that toddlerhood, they feel like their little ones are not following direction, but it's really because they're not hearing you. You can test that by saying, if you're looking at your child and you're communicating with them, are they following direction? They have their back to you and you're communicating with them and they're not responding back to you. So that's something that we would really recommend you to check. and speak to your pediatric about that. And also, is your child not following direction at this moment because your child is very engaged into playing with a toy? Is your child not following direction because another physical need is not being met? Is your child hungry? Like, you really need to look at what's happening around the child to see what are the triggers of why the child is not following the direction. So you need to be doing a little observation. And the observation is what's happening before, what's happening during, and what's happening after. And you do the same thing for yourself. Am I being frustrated with my child not following direction because I'm hungry, because I didn't sleep well last night? I just had an argument with someone. I'm coming across in a different perspective to my child, or my child is just acting on a behavior that is emotionally triggering me. Am I being a cause of my child not following the direction? So again, it's that self-reflection of the individual. What's causing this? What's happening to me before? What's happening to me during? And what happened after? So it's really good to track it in order to find out what's causing.
Yeah, that's really well said. And then also going back to what you're talking about a child may just simply not be able to hear. I know with myself, as a developing brain, that was something that I had a really hard time swaying my mind away from and focusing just on the words. So if a teacher was giving me directions in the class or trying to explain a lecture or things like this, then my mind would just be kind of all over the place listening to the tonality changes itself and then totally miss what was being said.
It's called teaching our children how to self-regulate. And these are terms that we were never raised on, and that's why parents are joining workshops like this, how to co-regulate, how to regulate. So if you have a child who has autism, who has ADD, if a child has an autism, the sounds are, if you and I are having a normal communication here and the child is at the other end, the sound for that child is 5 times more. So they can actually hear your mouth clenching. Imagine that's how aware of the sound they are. So when you're communicating to them, it becomes very difficult. So it's really important to have a very soft tone, to move into their eyes, focus with them, and help them through with a calm voice. A lot of time with picture labeling really helps you with following the direction.
And the thing with children is obviously they haven't developed their minds and their experience enough and their own ability to self-reflect, to understand themselves and what works for them and what doesn't. It's our job as parents, as teachers, as coaches, to kind of help them discover those things. Trying to keep all these things in mind, I think, helps in terms of managing our frustrations, because at the end of the day, our brains are fully developed and you're working with and you're trying to communicate with somebody who their brain isn't fully developed. And that can be very, very challenging, very difficult. So we've already talked about a couple tips. I'm sure there are a bunch of other ones that you could maybe suggest.
Having a routine in your home is the key. Just like a classroom has a routine, your house has to have a routine and a schedule. That routine and a schedule needs to be introduced to your child, even though to your toddler, that they need to be exposed to that through visuals. With the visual, they're learning routines, structure, time, boundaries, space. Once you do those, they're able to start following directions. So that's why this is really a top of the topic. To learn more, you need to really book your time with a practitioner or a therapist to learn more about it. But really, reality is giving yourself a space, giving them the space, and reminding them. Toddlers need reminders. If you want them to follow a direction, you need to notify them 3 times. You're going to tell them in 15 minutes, snack time. Toy will be put away, and then you show the clock, and you have the visuals. So now they know from this, I'm moving to this. So 10 minutes before that, you'd say, just a reminder, in 5 minutes, snack time. Toy will be put away.
Right.
Because they're toddlers. So you're going to have to repeat things many times.
Right.
So you go back and you're going to say, it's time now. So now you have to respect their space, their boundaries. Let's say they were working on this little block for like an hour or 15 minutes for a puzzle. It's okay if it remains at the table, if it's incomplete, and then can come back to it. They don't have to tidy it up. They worked really hard doing that. Imagine you work on something really hard and somebody says, it's time to put them away. That's going to make you very emotional. So you need to respect their boundaries. And let's say it's something that they built and they want to keep it for a week. You can say, okay, we can keep this for a week, or we can keep this for 3 days. You give them options. That's more for a preschooler. But normally a toddler, they don't mind tidying up. It's more like a preschooler. You want to give them that respect. And remember, for kids to follow directions, they need to know the rules. Let's make an example. The rule of going shopping. You're talking to your preschooler. You're making a rule, because a lot of times parents are going to the shopping mall, the child's running and is picking up all these things and wants to put it in the cart. You don't know what to do. And you're like, you're not following my directions.
Right.
It's putting those ground rules before going. So the ground rules for shopping is holding hands when we want to leave the parking lot. And then when you get to the store, that's when it's really fun, because I want to run in there. When we get to the shopping mall, we hold on to hands. When we're in the store, we hold on to the cart. You have maybe 4 rules. You don't want to make it too many rules. And then you have reward for the rules, and you have consequences for the rules. You don't want to make a huge consequence where you're not going to follow through. Okay, so if you hold on to the cart, follow with mommy or daddy, at the end of the day, you get to pick up between these 2 vegetables normally you get for him that he likes a lot, or the strawberries that he likes a lot. He gets to choose which one of those he wants to pick and put it in the cart. So you're not rewarding sugar. You're rewarding things that you normally purchase for him. If there's a situation where you're having a lot of difficulty with following direction, that's when you want to put a big reward. Maybe that reward would be going to the park, playing with friends.
That's super helpful. So what you're talking about here, first and foremost, is setting your own expectations that are realistic and fair. I think a lot of parents sort of trap themselves by expecting that, okay, I'm going to say this one time and that's going to be it. And my toddler, my child's just going to do what I like. That's the expectation I have in my mind. So as soon as whatever your expectation is, if there's anything that differentiates from that expectation in your regular life, then that can become quite conflicting and very frustrating. However, if you set your expectations such a way that are more reasonable and fair to how your child communicates and how your child is developing, then you're going into a situation in every communication in such a way that you know what to expect, and then nothing should kind of sway from that. You won't leave room for potentially getting very frustrated when things are not going the way that you expect them to go. You're getting feedback from your child all the time. So your child is giving you feedback that shows you that, hey, they need more repetition. Then again, reset the expectation that, hey, okay, maybe they need 5 times for me to repeat it. I'm going to go in expecting that, and I'm going to repeat it in this specific way to get this done. Also, keeping in mind rules. Children are all about games. If we know the rules of a game, we will look for a way to use those rules in order to win at that game. If there are no rules, we're going to come up with our own rules, because we need rules to understand how to kind of navigate life. So coming up with ways that create boundaries around every type of circumstance, it's necessary. So when we go shopping, this is what we do. When we're going to have dinner, this is what we do. And not too many rules, but just a few key rules. That way, when they're engaging with everyday life, they understand exactly how to win at every single activity. And then provide the reward system. You've now won. You played the game perfectly. You did exactly how you should do it. Good job. And this is what you get for doing that. And this is also what you get for not doing that. I also love the idea so much that you're talking about here, where you're saying, like, you know, make sure that repercussions of not following the rules aren't too dramatic, because oftentimes, like, even the smallest repercussion is enough for a young child to get the hint. The real repercussion is that they didn't win at the game. And that's going to shift their mindset. Be like, okay, I want to win at this, and then figure out a way to be able to get that reward at the end and not have to deal with any sort of repercussions, even if they're just really small. That's good advice. I love that so much. And I think that should hopefully be very helpful for everybody here. Yeah. So now there are other questions, of course, we have. Was there anything else that you wanted to mention in terms of tips or strategies?
I'm finding this workshop to be very effective, because it's not just hitting infants and toddlers, actually hitting preschoolers and adolescents too. So
are there any other tips or strategies that you want to talk about specifically with toddlers?
I think that routine structure we talked about, setting up those realistic boundaries, and the reminders are important, and being assertive with your rules. They don't understand why I'm allowed to this time, but I'm not allowed to next time. That reminder is very important. Children, they have voices. In toddler, their voices of frustration can can come through big emotions. We call them tantrums. I call them big emotions. You can see them through their crying, through their night terrors, different ways. Sometimes they just need a hug. Maybe they're not following your direction because they are frustrated about something. They just don't know how to word it. And all they want is not you raising your voice at them. It's you going in, give them a big hug, say, I see that you're sad. And then talk about the directions through visual. Really, I don't know how else to emphasize that with infants, toddlers, and preschoolers. Using visuals are the most important key to help them with understanding what's coming after and what to do and following your directions.
Right. Visuals are also a really good way to help them just communicate ideas they would not normally ever be able to express. Hungry or sad or angry or happy, and then having those on display and they can just go there and point at it. Definitely good strategies there. Now, you talked a little bit at the beginning about having to always running after your toddler, maybe constantly repeating instructions. Would you say that this is pretty normal? Is this something that happens a lot?
Yeah, because they're learning, they're exploring. We're the educator. We are there to teach them how to follow directions. But it really is about finding what are our triggers, what are the things that are important to us, and what is it that we want to fight over? What's worth fighting over and what's not worth fighting over, right? What are your battles as a parent?
Right.
Because every home is different and every parenting is different. It's finding those little things and understanding at the end of the day, you are the parent of the child. The child is not to run the house, just like the child should not run the classroom.
It'd be a mess.
Yeah, having those boundaries, guidelines there, and having your own expectations, being assertive about them. It's all about that.
Like I've noticed that the idea of being assertive is separating what your needs are with any emotion you might have that is tied to that need in that moment. If you need your toddler to do something like it's time for dinner, distancing yourself from any sort of emotionality in regards to what you need your toddler to do. So, hey, it's time for dinner now. We're going to stop playing with our toys now. We're going to start coming to the table. Sometimes a lot of people think raising your voice, authoritative type of persona. It's not necessarily about that. It's about clearly explaining what needs to be happening without any sort of emotionality tied to it, then offering the repetition, providing instructions maybe in different ways without the emotionality tied to it. Yeah.
It's important when you want your little toddler or preschooler to follow directions, when you have your daily schedule and you're doing your observation to see what's happened, because we're going to do a lot of before, during, and after until we find out what works for us. You want to look at what's the routine you're doing before that maybe needs to be a routine that needs to be moved. For example, if your routine in your home, which should not be happening, but it could happen, is half an hour of a screen time of a cartoon for a toddler and then coming and having dinner, not going to work. Okay, you might going to have some direction issues. That's why sometimes you'll find parents, even they bring the iPad to the table, so the child is eating while they're watching the iPad. You need to look at what is it you're doing and what are the routine structure you need to change that can help following the direction. So you can remain assertive and where your emotional regulation is not going to go high, where you're going to go in the red zone.
Easier said than done. When you're trying to communicate, it can be exhausting and it can be very challenging to be able to stay calm and collected. Sometimes it's about just finding like 1 or 2 minutes to just diffuse or get yourself in a different mind frame by doing something even very small for yourself. And also it's a lot of good, solid self-talk. There's a lot of other tips when it comes to mindfulness and things like that that can really help us to also self-regulate. Now, in terms of, dealing and working with our preschoolers, our toddlers, when it comes to their tantrums and big emotions, we talked about this, specifically when we're trying to communicate directions. What are some things, besides maybe some physical touch, because some children are not into physical touch at all if they're really having a big emotion and a difficult time, but what are some other things that you've noticed that can be really helpful in those moments?
Helping them with breathing. Basically, you're going to breathe with them. Okay, cool. Like you're going to take... And then what you want to do, with little ones, you're counting from 5 to 0. For you yourself as an adult, if you're going through that big emotion, you want to count from 10 backwards. With an adolescent, normally 10 backwards. You can do it in a game. You use your hand. You go breathe in, breathe out, 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 and then they like it.
Very visual.
Yeah.
When young children are having to use two senses at the same time, it can really get their brain to focus on what works for them. And also, something might work for a while, like a long time, something might work, and then all of a sudden it just stops working.
Yeah.
And then you have to come up with a brand new strategy.
Yeah.
Like, it's just the way it goes. If you are having trouble with getting your young children to follow directions and you've tried all the things that we've mentioned, do speak to somebody, even if it's just for one session, whether it's through Inventive Kids or not, but speak to somebody who you trust, who has some experience that can work with your specific situation. Because again, like I know I've reiterated this a few times, but I want to make sure this is really clear. Like, these are overarching general ideas that work for a lot of people, but it may not necessarily work for you. Not to say that there's anything wrong with you or your child or anything like that. It's just everybody's situation is different. So hopefully that gives you some ideas. What about you, Rose? Is there anything in particular you want to leave everybody with?
I just want to extend what you said, just that there's so much insight to a situation. You may see something from outside as a parent, but there's so many other things that can be happening inside. You still need to remember they're babies. They're not always going to follow your direction. That is something, it is going to happen. You're not going to have this perfect toddler or preschooler who's always going to follow direction. They're going to see that balloon that is red up high and you're in the street, and that's going to attract them. Knowing what are certain things that can become a trigger is also important, so you create that safe environment for them. And these are just pointers when it comes to helping children follow directions, the routines, what kind of parenting style I have. Am I a lawn maker? Am I the type of parent that get overwhelmed and anxious? Am I a helicopter parent? Am I an authoritarian parent? Am I a permissive parent? Am I an authoritative parent? Where do I fit?
Right. There's a lot to unpack.
There's a lot of that kind of thing. So it's really important when you're dealing with a situation to seek professional support and make a plan for your family. You might talk to a friend, which is wonderful. They're going to give you some information. This person's going to give you this information. And then you feel actually more lost than you know where you're going. And then you feel like you're a horrible parent where you're not.
Right. When you're doing anything for the first time, you're not necessarily going to be amazing at it. Working with somebody who has mastered the skills is going to be super beneficial. But the reality is we all need help with stuff. It's normal that they know what they're talking about. So hopefully that helps. As we're going to say our goodbyes.
I want to thank you again for being here with us. You can also reach out to inventivekids.com. You can learn about our elementary school, our early years center, childcare. You can learn about our parent practitioner support, community groups. Also, we work with families going through family mediation, separation, child voice reports, anything that you feel that your family needs for community, we're here to support you. Once again, thanks for joining Inventiveminds Family Support Center. And we look forward to having you all back. Have a great day, everyone.